Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Rishika, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all back to this continuing series called Enabling E-commerce, which is brought to you in partnership with Easy Dubai E-commerce Zone, part of the logistics district at Dubai South. The past number of months have changed what we consider to be normal. Many of us have had to change our behaviors and adapt. When we look at retail in particular, consumers have come to rely very heavily on online shopping, almost as their lifeline. As a result, businesses have had to, to survive, they've had to completely adapt to this new consumer behavior, and in some cases have also had to completely pivot their business model. A shift in consumer behavior to this scale is obviously a catalyst in how e-commerce and retailers will operate in the future. Today, we're here to discuss the role of technology in enabling this shift. And joining me in this discussion are two experts, one who represents retail tech beyond the digital aspects of the terminology, and another who is currently operating in the very popular e-grocery space. And if I may quote him, his business is not a reaction to the trends, but rather built on a very successful foundation. So to get the discussion started, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our first speaker for today, Owen Farrow, leader, retail and consumer products industry, IBM. Owen, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Rishika. Great to be here today. I'm really looking forward to this webinar. I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. Firstly, a little bit of background on myself so you see where I'm coming from. I've been in the region now for around about 11 or 12 years, based here in Dubai. I work for IBM and I look after the retail and consumer industry in Middle East and Africa. So I speak regularly with everybody from mall operators to apparel retailers to grocers, everywhere from Cape Town to Dubai and up as far as Istanbul. So I've got a pretty broad appreciation of what's going on in this market, and this market has always been quite a dynamic market, and no more, I think, than Dubai. Dubai is probably the most vibrant part of the territory that I look after. So I'm really interested to see, how this is sort of going forward, what innovations, and particularly in this COVID world, how we are adapting and adjusting our behaviors. So with that, I think, Rahid, over to yourself for your introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen, and good morning, everybody. My name is Raed Hafez. I'm the CEO of Algrocer, Dubai-based mobile grocery marketplace. We cater to all of the UAE. Been in Dubai in the UAE for 13 years now. I moved here from the US with a large multinational company. And I immediately fell in love with the entrepreneurship spirit and the startup ecosystem of Dubai and UAE. So I left a 20-year career with a large company to get involved with a number of different startups. And back in 2015, got involved with Algrocer as one of the founding members. And it's been an extremely interesting and exciting journey so far. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion here and the webinar, and especially the Q&A session. So thank you, and over to you, Rishika.
Hi guys, and welcome back. Thank you for the round of introductions, and I'm very much looking forward to kind of jump into the discussion today. I'd just like to remind everyone that's tuning in and watching us right now, we are streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. So any questions that you have for our experts, please do post them there as comments, and we will be picking them up. So before we get into the audience part, audience Q&A part, I'd like to start the discussion and get the address the obvious aspect before we kind of get into the discussion, which is the impact of COVID-19, right? A lot of things are being said with regards to the impact towards e-commerce and particularly e-grocery. And I'd like to get your insights. Owen, perhaps I'll start with you if that's okay. And I'd like to pose this question to you. Do you think online is now just the new normal?
Thanks, Rishika. I think it's a very good question, because I think what's happened with COVID-19 and disruption it's made to our daily lives, online has, in a lot of ways, become a new normal for us. And if we look at Dubai, historically, I think like last year, some statistics I read said that Dubai had a online penetration of around about 2 to 3% of total retail sales, which lags quite significantly behind what you see in mature markets, where it might be as much as 12 to 14%. But this is all sort of before COVID. And I think that during COVID, you've seen this acceleration to adopt more online channels. And by the way, I think we have a lot of boxes ticked here to make this a continued reality. We're like something like more than 200% penetrated when we think about mobile phones. We are an international logistics hub. We have a youthful population, a lot of whom are digital natives. And I think by nature, we're a trusting community. And so things like digital payments, cashless transactions, mobile wallets, etc., I think they're a kind of easy second nature to us. So I think that now, as we're kind of looking forward, I think that this online will become more of a new normal. And I remember reading an article that said something like, if you do something for around about 6 weeks, it has the potential to be a new behavior. If you continue to doing it for another up to 6 months, then it actually is a new behavior. It is a new habit. If you look back, we're around about the 6-month time frame now since we've been experiencing COVID. So I kind of look at it this way and think, you know what, some of these behaviors that we've adopted, maybe we're not going back. Maybe we're going to be moving forward in the way in which we're working or living our lives today. So I think that's kind of really interesting. So Rishika, back to you.
Thanks, Owen. Raid, I'd like to throw the same question at you, and I'd also like to extend it slightly in asking you, because obviously you're experiencing the shift that we're talking about. How are you seeing customer behaviors change? So do you really think online is a new normal? And also on the back of that, how are your customers behaving differently?
Yes, I mean, thanks, Rishika. I think the one thing about the UAE and this region in general is the consumers are relatively young. There's a significant size of young consumers who are digitally natives, and they're very comfortable with technology, right? And up till this point, it was very desirable for them to be able to shop online and to engage with businesses online. But unfortunately, from the business side of things, it was seen as the percentages are small. As Owen said, it was 2 to 3%. It's a nice to have. Now the shift has happened, and businesses do recognize that it's a must-have, being online and the channel being online. And at the same time, consumers are now no longer desiring that they're able to shop online. They're demanding that access is made online for all their essentials and regular purchases. So that shift in behavior and demand, and the recognition by businesses that it's a top priority now, is going to be propelling now us to move much faster to start catching up with other areas in the world where we start seeing the adoptions of the 14, 15. Our projection is that we'll be seeing up, almost 15% within the next 2 years in the grocery segment alone to be online, and that's pretty reasonable once you consider that grocery shopping is a chore. If people are starting to ration the amount of time they're spending outside, then it's probably not being in the supermarket to where they would want to spend that time. They'd rather be with their friends out and about. And one thing about the consumer behavior also is we saw during this, during the initial time of the pandemic, Even before the movement restrictions kicked in, we started seeing people increasing their shopping. Since March 1st, about 20%, we started witnessing a 20% growth week on week until we started hitting March 21st. Once we hit March 21st, by end of March, we saw a 400% increase in volume compared to pre-COVID. What was interesting is that our basket value was already quite big. And what we have seen is that basket value continued growing even bigger, but it was mainly by the quantities increasing, which meant that people were stocking up rather than just buying a bigger variety. That has subsided a bit, and people have become a lot more comfortable now and secure about it. So we're still seeing about 2 to 3 times pre-COVID levels. I think that's a reflection, as what Owen said, is people are now developing the habit of shopping online.
So I'd like to, since you mentioned, supermarkets, and since we're talking about online shopping on an upward trend, I'd like to kind of ask the flip side of that question, right? There's a lot of talk around the physical stores, and you see headlines that say, "Oh, the store is dead." But obviously, that's not the case, because it's more of a model where you have to have a blended model between physical and digital, and that's something that really needs to be talked about. So, Owen, what are your thoughts with regards to, because I know you have experience of working with brands and retailers where you've actually helped them achieve a balance between the two?
Yeah, thanks. I think you're right. All the research that we've done and the clients that I speak to, it's really clear that the store is not going to be dead. We think that, okay, maybe e-com gets up and maxes out at maybe 20%. The store is still going to drive 80%, of the volume of trading. I think what's going to change, and it's becoming a little bit cliche to say this, but it all is going to be becoming about experience. And I think that you're going to see the stores do 2 things. I think they're going to repurpose around how do we actually provide a richer experience that deepens the engagement with the consumer, and then also how do they seamlessly bridge back out into the digital world, because we're becoming so digitally savvy these days that we actually don't see these boundaries. If I start my journey online and then I start to migrate my experience to in-store, then I want that to happen seamlessly. I don't want to be figuring that that's a different persona or a different experience for me. It needs to be quite sort of seamless. So I think that what you are going to see is that whilst digital might give you convenience, I think what's going to happen is that you're going to still be wanting to have the store to deliver experience. I think that's the way it's going to kind of play out.
Superb. So building on to that, Rayed, I'd like to ask you, and this is something that you mentioned in our discussion offline, that your business is not a reaction to the trends, and it's not a reaction to what's currently happening. And I really like that, because you obviously started your business back in 2015. Can you tell us a little bit about what was in your mind at that point when you decided to go live with El Grosser, and what was the business model that you were trying to achieve? You obviously have a very curated, shopping experience for the consumer when they come online. Was that something that you intended? What was the thought process?
Yeah, so the El Grosser was founded by a number of people who come from different backgrounds, mainly very deep FMCG background, consumer behavior background, and then obviously technology. And what we saw is that there is a rising trend at that time where, as we said, the millennials and Gen Z are valuing convenience, are valuing freedom, and are able to they want to be able to shop and choose what they want and where they want it and when they want it. And so it was pretty clear to us from that time that online grocery was a place to be. It's a need that will be recession proof, right? It's something that's an essential you have to have. It's something that as you get hooked on, you increase your frequency, because that's what's unique about it, is that you have your daily top-ups, you have your weekly buys, you have your monthly buys. You want to get some organics today, you want to get some so there is a lot of variety. So there's so many good things about it. What was always challenging about it is that it was a very traditional industry, right? It's run by some very large players, very traditional in how things are done. And so penetrating those businesses and getting them convinced that moving online was an important thing took a lot of convincing on our part. And we were pretty happy that, we were ready. But when we started, we already had all the largest co-ops on our platform. We already had a very strong mix of supermarkets and specialty stores. But what we did realize when COVID hit is that we were still playing to the it's a nice to have, and focusing on areas where it's high population density and where people are with high dispensable income to be able to actually go and shop online. And we realized, and during the pandemic, that whole mission changed, right? Because we said, no, everybody now has a need to be able to get to their groceries. And it's no longer just a nice to have, it's a must have. There's no reason to risk your health to go out and buy your groceries. So we quickly extended our reach to cover all of the UAE. And that took a lot of work, but we were able to do it because we had the relationships with some of the largest retailers. And the other thing that we've done is that we reached out to a number of small businesses that never had access to online, and we enabled them to go online quite quickly. And that made a big difference, right? You've got some ethnic stores, you've got some organics, you've got some sweets that people couldn't get to. Now they are able to reach all of Dubai, if not all of the UAE. And so that was a major shift in our thinking, going from the nice to have to, no, this is a mission. This is something that we have to bring to everybody.
So, Raed, another question for you. I know this is probably a frequently asked question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's important. How did you build your competitive advantage, and how do you kind of differentiate yourself from a traditional retailer or a mom and pop grocery store in a community? How are you delivering a slightly different experience to that?
I'm glad you asked. I mean, it's obviously the space was already had competition before COVID, and then after COVID, everybody jumped in, and we saw a lot of businesses that actually changed their business model from focusing on the rich and profitable restaurant and food delivery to becoming grocery delivery. But where we differentiate is in a couple of things. One is we're one place where your all of your grocery shopping missions, whether it's your daily top-ups or your weekly or your specialty or your big bulk buys, are being served in one place. The other thing is what we're doing is that we're selecting a number of different stores that are available to you within your community. Once you launch your application, you select your location and you kind of tell us where you are. And that allows us to provide you with the businesses that are serving your community. And so by doing that curation, by doing the variety, by enabling different types of retailers, that's a big differentiation for us. The one last thing is, and that's really important for us because we believe that it's a major shift from what others are doing, is that we make our partners extremely visible, right? We believe the retail partners, the small businesses, have invested a lot in building their brand, in building their product selection and variety. And so we want to make sure that a consumer, a shopper, knows that they're buying something from such and such store compared to others. And that's pretty important for us.
Thanks, Raed. So, Owen, over to you. Based on what Raed said, and from an outsider's perspective, from the perspective of an industry, leader, what do you think of Raed's, curated shopping experience business model, and how do you see that fitting into what we're seeing happening with the overall retail space at the moment?
Yeah, I think the model is a great one. And I think that Dubai as a market is really super interesting, because this model where you have platforms going to market like El Grocer, where they're bringing brands together, they're curating the content, they're providing them with like I said, a channel or a route to market. But at the same time, taking responsibility for the brands that they bring into the portfolio, that I think is not only where the industry is heading as a whole, but I think in Dubai, we are probably leading the charge when I think about it in that way. Because when I look at other markets, when I've spent time in South Africa, or I spend time in East Africa and all the way up to Turkey, I don't see it as dominant as I see it in the UAE. And maybe it's because, we are a community that is used to the idea of being well serviced. So maybe that fits well to our expectation. Maybe it's because we're a community that's quite trusting. So we believe that when we buy something, we get what we buy, etc. So maybe that's why it's heading that way. But I think this idea that curation is king is one where the future is kind of heading, because people recognize that no one brand is going to deliver to all of their needs. Rather, our lives are quite, multi-dimensional and dynamic. So it is really about having that trusted partner who can kind of maybe coach us to even find out about brands and products and offerings that we don't even know ourselves. Because in the absence of them bringing those to our attention, we don't kind of, know about it. So I think it's a strong model. It's very strong in Dubai, and I think it's where the future's heading.
Thanks, Owen. So I'd like to take a second and circle back to where we started with our discussion today, which was technology, right? And the role of technology in enabling retailers to move to the online space. There seems to be this misconception, or this kind of thought that as an SME, the technology that will help me get to that finish line is almost impossible. It's this impossible challenge to overcome. I'd like to throw this question to the both of you actually, and ask you, how can an SME actually overcome this barrier of technology? Because obviously that's not true, and there's a variety of solutions available. So as an SME, where do I start? What's the first step that I need to take?
Who's going first? You or me, right? You go first. Go ahead. You go first.
All right, I'll take a quick stab at this. So I absolutely agree that technology, access to technology is democratized and it's equal, right? There are to go online, there should be no barrier with regards to business size to be able to go online. And we've seen that where some, individual entrepreneurs are able to go online and provide their products and services, from social commerce all the way to full, omni-channel type of an approach. However, what we're also seeing is this perception that all it takes to go online is to bring somebody and develop an app, for example, and launch it. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? In order for you to provide a flawless experience to the consumer, there is a whole set of activities behind it that enable us to make sure that once you've ordered something, that product is delivered to you on time, quality, and there's a proper customer service follow-up. And so what we always tell our partners is, yes, somebody could come here and offer you an application and you can go and launch your own store. But who's going to make sure that, number one, that consumer experience is flawless? And number two is all the physical activities that go behind the scene to bring you online have been put in place. So I do agree with you. There should be no reason why a business cannot go online, but I do recommend everybody to be choosing wisely how they do that. So Owen, any thoughts?
I want to thank Rahid for taking all my talking points, but
sorry.
no, but I think I'm totally on the same page with you here, because now look, you even if you go back 10 odd years ago or whatever, things like concepts like cloud were not prevalent, concepts like software as a service were not prevalent, you know. So but now today everything's on the cloud, everything's available, you know, as a service. So there's no barrier, I think, to getting online. I think the trick is exactly, Rahid, as you were saying, it's about making, you've got this overwhelming burden of choice right now of options. So you need to sort through that. And what I've found increasingly with clients is that what needs to happen is you need to take a step back. And what we spend a lot of our time doing, you might find this strange for IBM, but we spend a lot of time designing customer experiences with our clients. And we're big proponents of design thinking. And we spend a lot of time sitting back with clients and saying, let's imagine the kind of journey that you want your customer to take, but more to the point, how are you going to honor that journey? Because it's all well and good having these big aspirations and these big promises, but if you can't keep your promise, then you're in a lot of trouble. Because today, just like we talk now about how we have so many tech choices around how do we get stuff done as a retailer, as a consumer, you have so many product choices that if you don't serve me well the first time, maybe I won't go back the second time. So it is really all about how do you design the journey, how do you articulate the journey, and how do you make sure that it lands on the technology that makes sense for you? Because now the consumer's expectations are so high that, you know, we're kind of even struggling to meet them. I remember a quote of a colleague. He said something like, your last best experience is your experience, you know, because that's what if a bank served you really well, then you cannot understand why your El Grocer can't serve you in that fashion. You know, you kind of transition between all these people you touch digitally, and their experience sets the bar for the next experience that you want to see. So it's a very complicated world I think we live in right now.
Yeah, can I add to that? I think I think Owen touched on a really important point here, which is, you know, the consumer experience and people's. So as technology is democratized and access is available to everybody, obviously everybody's now able to equally voice their concerns and their opinions. And so what happens is, most of the time, people who are upset, right? They go in droves online and they voice their concerns a lot more than you've got, you know, potentially people that are happy. The point is, when you're going online, right, you have to be doubly more careful about how you're executing everything. There has got to be, you know, and nobody is flawless. Everybody's going to make mistakes, but how quickly can you react to those mistakes? How can you handle them? How can you respond? How can you take care of the consumer and the shopper? So all of these things get introduced with going online that a physical store typically doesn't have to deal with. And so, as Owen mentioned, you know, consumer experience and making sure you're keeping a very close eye on it is crucial when you go online.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Owen. So we've obviously discussed the opportunities, and it's very clear that, you know, this space is going to see a rise. We've talked about sort of, you know, the good trends and, you know, the positives. I'd like to take a second and, you know, now move on to some of the challenges that you might face. And Ryan, this is perhaps one for you to take. And building on to that, I also have, you know, an audience question that has come in. So, Raid, what are some of the challenges that, you know, you faced, particularly now with increasing demand? You know, things like logistics, managing inventory. Do you want to shed some light on that, please?
Sure. So I mean, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, when we during the peak of it, we quickly saw a 4 to 5x rise in demand. And while we had a bit of a, as I said, we had about 20% increase on a week-on-week basis, nobody was able to forecast and predict what was going to happen, once a full movement restriction was put in place. So we had delays, right? And we started facing difficulties in being able to onboard people quickly enough, because we handle a lot of logistics in the stores. Contrary to some other marketplaces where they just simply give an order to the retailer and let them deal with it. We actually have our own people in the store so that they can select the best products and deliver it. So we had to triple our team size in a span of a week in order for us to be able to handle the rise in demand. That was extremely challenging. The ability to go and train everybody that quickly, find the right people quickly. Luckily or unluckily, we had a number of industries that were facing a lot of challenges. So we were able to tap in. We did a lot of collaborations with people from hospitality industry, where we were able to bring people from them. But it still took a lot of time. The other thing is we rely on our retail partners for the products. And so they started facing a number of out of stocks. And that's just because they couldn't get their goods replenished from their distribution fast enough. So people got upset. I mean, rightfully so. With the delays, with everything, people had to go and place an order sometimes a week in advance in order for them to get it. And when the time came, they found that a good portion of their order was out of stock. And so they were upset. What we've had to do is work a lot closer with our retail partners. We've had to, as I said, triple our staff. We've had to make sure that we're extremely transparent with our shoppers, and working to try to find alternatives so that we can be a lot more flexible. We increased the number of store partners, so also lower the load on just one, the set of retailers that we're working on. So yeah, with the increase in demand, a lot of new challenges came up. We're very happy to see that our technology was able to scale with it, right? But there are definitely a number of physical activities that we're involved in that were pushed to a point where we had to go and reassess how we're doing things. And we've done that already. We put these corrective actions in place.
So continuing with the same thread, right? Another question that's come in, and this is actually an excellent question. It asks, given the logistics challenges, how does your platform, which is El Grocer, help brands manage their inventory? So you said you had partners that were running out of stock. How can those brands use El Grocer as a platform to actually overcome some of these challenges?
So we do that actually in two different ways. So in a physical store, in physical retail, right? When someone goes in and doesn't find what they're looking for, they simply turn around and leave. And the store owner doesn't really know, right? What is it they were looking for and what is it they're missing? In our situation, we actually are able to tell store owners, and sometimes more importantly, the brands and the distributors, that your product is running out of stock in the middle of the day or middle of the week in these places. Make sure that you're able to cover with better, distribution routes, so that your products doesn't run out of stock. Or to the retailer manager, make sure that you're increasing the frequency or the quantities of your orders. So that's one. The other one that we do is that we actually analyze, for different categories of stores, we have different, what we call a must stock list, right? And this is, we tell a store, look, for your category in the area that you serve, these are the products you have to have, right? You're missing out on a significant number of shoppers if you don't have this selection. So we're actually able to provide them guidance and consultation of what's the inventory selection and mix that you need to have in order for you to maximize your sales. So these are the two different things that we do to help retailers.
Super, thanks, Rad. I hope that answered the question. Owen, another question, and I'd like to push this to you, asks, where are the gaps in the online retail space extending beyond just the grocery market? So what are your thoughts on that?
Say that one more time, the gaps in online beyond grocery?
Yes, exactly.
I think that, you know, all the different categories that are out there all have their own kind of unique challenges. And I think they're all sort of work online in different kind of ways. You know, you have a look at something like, you know, apparel, for example. There's a lot of emphasis, I think, when you start to buy apparel online around self-discovery. You know, I think that we spend a lot of time making decisions about, you know, what goes with what and how, you know, how should I wear this particular item, what colors are on trend, looking at other things like, you know, what influencers, celebrities, etc. are going to be, you know, influencing my buying decision. So I think that a lot of that is well facilitated online. And what I'm starting to see now is that some of those kind of tactics are crossing over into other categories. And Rahid and yourself, we were discussing this earlier, that there is a great opportunity to explore how we can bring our customers closer to the things that we eat, our grocery products, and how we can start to take some of those tactics that are, say, used in the apparel business online into the way in which we start to market and sell our food products. And I think already Rahid's doing stuff around like recipes for food, etc. So I think those kind of things need to sort of, you know, cross over from category to category. So I think that there's not particularly one big gap in any particular category. I think what we're seeing more of is that ways of behavior and lessons learned in one category are now becoming sort of crossovers into other categories. And as I've highlighted earlier, we take those lessons from other industries as well, our experience with banks and telcos, with our government. All of those kind of online experiences, I think, can kind of be drawn upon to influence how we design the customer experience for our retailing.
All right, thanks, Owen. I hope that answered the question. Another one that's come in, and this asks, what are some of the technologies available to me to improve my customer experience online? I think, Owen, do you want to take a stab at this one as well?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of technologies out there that actually just make getting the job of you know, buying and selling done a lot easier. So there's a lot of technologies around how do you address your logistics and your supply chain. I think they're becoming fundamentally important, and I think those technologies now are not limiting themselves to you know, any one single mode of delivery to the consumer. So gone are the days where person would go to the store and that's where they would get their product. Now consumers have an expectation that to get something, it may be coming from, you know, even home delivery may be coming from a store. It may not necessarily be coming from a distribution center. So I think logistics technologies, order management technologies are becoming more and more sophisticated as our requirements become more and more complex. So I think that's one thing to look at. I think another thing that we were discussing offline is technologies like blockchain. And that's an interesting technology from the perspective when you look at it, say, in the food context, that blockchain is just really a technical platform that allows you to have total accountability of all of the contributors to the supply of a product, a fresh fruit or vegetable, going all the way back from the grower all the way through the supply chain, the cold chain, to the actual store itself. I think technologies like blockchain are going to become more and more accessible because consumers are going to want to know more and more about the origin of their product. Today, we kind of do it intuitively when we walk into a supermarket and we make decisions about product based perhaps on country of origin. Now I think people are going to become more expecting that they want to see where did that product come from, where was it grown, making sure that all the things that they value, whether it's freshness, whether it's organic, all those kind of things are there and they're accountable, and we kind of make our purchase decisions because of that. So I think those are two key technologies I see right now that are going to become more prevalent.
Right.
If you don't,
Oh, sorry.
sorry.
Yeah.
I was just
I was
gonna
asking you
add
to
to.
jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna add to that. Especially for small businesses, right? If they're looking to go online, they need to look at all the different activities that they engage in. So typically, when they're in a store, they're trying to attract people, right? They're going and advertising wherever they are. Moving to online, they need to now start finding ways where that advertisement, that online placement they're putting in, is automatically bringing the consumers to their store. So it has an immediate click. A number of online channels, whether it's social media like Facebook and Instagram and others, are enabling that you're able to now link your products directly into those social media, and so that way your customers are able to browse and buy from your social media channel. Then you start looking into the actual and by the way, as I mentioned earlier, social commerce is not just Instagram, and you can also bring it to the chat capability. So I'm actually familiar with a fruit juice place that has enabled a chat bot to be able to serve the different menu items that they have, and able to still get orders and be ready for pickup once the customer placed their order. So there is a number of different small solutions that a small business is able to engage in, so that they can place their store online. Going back to the discussion that Owen and I had previously, is just make sure, don't think that just by doing that, that's it, right? You need to keep in mind the full user experience. But going online isn't that complicated. It's making sure that you continuously serve your customers at the highest quality and the best experience. That's where the challenge comes in. That's where the heavy lifting comes in. But it's exciting work, and I encourage every small business to look into that seriously.
Interesting, right? So I think you sort of answered the question I was about to ask you. But what I wanted to know was, what are some technologies that you're using personally within your business to scale up? Because now that you have, you mentioned you stabilized in terms of customer demand. What is next for El Grocer when it comes to technology?
So our technology is homegrown, but obviously what we do is, and the reason for that, by the way, is that we consider ourselves a technology company, right? And so any technology startup should own their technology stack. Now, there are a number of building blocks. As Owen mentioned earlier, blockchain is a technology platform, but you build on top of that. What we're focusing on mainly is artificial intelligence, because by adding AI into the shopping behavior, you're able to improve the customer experience significantly. We're obviously, mobile technologies, and how do you present more exciting engagement activities or engaging experiences. Again, as a discussion we had earlier, it used to be that people are expecting experiences in the physical store. They're gonna still expect that, but maybe for different categories. But a lot of those experiences have to move online. So technologies that enhance the consumer engagement and the product experience and the shopping experience, and to allow for customization and personalization through AI. Those are the things that we're focusing on now.
Thanks, Raed. Yeah. So I have another question coming in, and this is perhaps a good question to kind of round up the discussion we've had today. It asks, how can SMEs think to improve their customer experiences, and what is your advice for an SME that's operating currently within the e-commerce space? So perhaps, Owen, do you wanna get started with this one and get Raed to jump in?
Yeah, I think it goes back to some of the things we have been discussing before. I think that we need to not be seduced by the ready availability of some technical solutions and to jump into a technical solution without thinking about what is the experience we're trying to deliver to the customer. Because if there's a broken experience that you take to market, then you're in a lot of trouble. And sometimes, you know, some of the technologies that might seduce us, we might find out if we take a step back, maybe they are not suitable to the kind of our brand, our image, or the kind of consumer behavior that we kind of, you know, want to drive. So I think that's really where we need to sort of, you know, I think start is just pause, think, have a good look at what's out there, and then think about how you can bring those together in the most sort of cohesive and sort of coherent way. And Rahid said something earlier that really struck home with me as well, is that at the end of the day, a lot of this is driven by data and analytics, that as you start to deliver an experience, it's the data and analytics that lives underneath this that then fuels the next experience. And I like to say that every interaction we have today is a transaction. We have so much analytical capability out there that every time we don't have to buy or browse to be seen. You know, we just have to be there on the digital platform, and that behavior is being looked at. And we have to be really considerate, I think, as retailers about how do we not overreach? How do we take that data? How do we use that superpower, if you like, for good? How do we, you know, drive a better experience? And at the end of the day, deepen that engagement, that relationship to our consumer. I think that for me is sort of sums it up.
Fantastic. Raid, any parting thoughts? What is your final advice for SMEs tuning in today?
So absolutely, online is a must. It doesn't matter what type of business you're in, there has to be some level of engagement online with your customers. And as Owen said, don't jump into this ready-made, you know, I'm not saying that some of it is not good, but it's not the end-all be-all. Just being online doesn't remove the need for the heavy lifting and the heavy work offline to make sure that the customer experience is perfect. There is, you know, once you go online, there is a never-ending depth of technology and innovations. We get introduced to new innovations on a daily basis that can improve and enhance how we do business. So part of that, it's too easy to fall into the trap of doing everything, and because of that, you need to also pace yourself, introduce yourself online slowly, make sure you are doing a lot of rapid tests to see what the consumer reactions are. Because again, if you make a mistake, a consumer is willing to, voice their concern and forgive you if you correct it. But if you make that mistake twice and 3 times, then they're going to be voting by uninstalling you and never coming back. So make sure you implement and test often. Do it in increments. Don't go and try to boil the ocean all at once. It's not for just the large companies. Everybody needs to start getting access to online, and everybody can. It just takes a little bit more effort and more attention to things that maybe you were not comfortable with in the past.
Brilliant. All right, so it looks like we are approaching, the end of our allocated time, and I'd like to thank you both for your insights today. I think I've had some great takeaways, and I hope we've managed to address audience questions, and I'm sure Owen and Raid will be more than happy to address any questions that you have offline if we haven't managed to answer your questions. So thank you all for watching. Thank you both once again for joining me today, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I hope to see you again, hopefully on another session in the future. Thank you, guys.
Pleasure. Thank you, Rishika. Thank you, Owen.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Take care.